Hi, my name is Suzanne McAllister, and I'm with Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia. And I started an interview series in late December of 2020 and have continued that. And today I'm doing a second interview, or actually, Nancy's going to interview me, but with my friend Nancy C., who I've known for many years. And the reason that we did the initial interview was that Nancy is one of the few non-vegans in my life, or who I know at all, who has consistently been, I don't know, I guess I could say admiring, supportive of
Curious
my,
about,
what?
curious about.
Curious, okay, about my veganism. So there's never been any defensiveness. I've never felt, some of the resistance that I often get from people that I think those of you who are vegan are very familiar with. So I interviewed Nancy about a month ago. If you haven't seen it, you can go to the Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia YouTube page and you'll see it posted there. And I thought it was interesting, illuminating, fun. And when Nancy and I then talked a little bit after the interview, I think it was my idea, came up with the idea of Nancy interviewing me about why I am vegan, since I was asking her why she's not vegan. So I'm handing it over to you, Nancy.
Okay, Suzanne, thank you. It's always wonderful to see you. So a lot of my questions are going to have to do with the evolution of veganism in your life and in the world. So I'm going to start with, did your veganism evolve gradually, starting with one or two, what I'll call principles or practices, or did you approach it very holistically from the start?
That's a good question. And I would say that it's not like I flipped a switch and went from eating animals, dairy, to not eating them like overnight. What happened was I read a book called Fast Food Nation, which I was reading because I was very interested in obesity in America. And this guy was writing about fast food. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. Somebody's done some research, et cetera. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of the chapters was about factory farming. And I read it and my jaw dropped. I was unaware, had no idea. And like many of us, never really thought about where is my food coming from. You know, you see the trucks with the happy cows prancing through the meadow, and I bought it. You know, I thought that's the way it is. So that was the beginning. And I would say that I pretty much cut out beef, pork, chicken, fish. I didn't eat much to begin with, so that I never had again. I think I had chicken one more time, and I'll never forget it because I looked down at my plate and I was no longer looking at chicken the way I had when I was eating it regularly. And I thought, that's a leg. That's a breast. I don't want to do this. And I remember sort of not finishing the meal. I think I was at my sister's house. And so I was done with anything like that. The cheese and dairy were harder for me, as I have heard from many people. Cheese I eventually eliminated, and then the last to go was what I used to put cream in my coffee, and I love my coffee. And so to transition to almond milk or soy milk, that was the last. So I'm going to say the whole process might have taken as long as 6 months. It was not overnight. Yeah.
Okay. And then how has it evolved since then? What did you have some major epiphanies or moments that made you approach or practice veganism for different reasons, different principles, like animal cruelty or the use
Well,
of
it
animal
was
testing, things like that?
from the beginning, it was animal cruelty. I mean,
Okay.
reading
Yeah.
about factory farms, that was it. So it was not for environmental reasons. It was not for health reasons. It was definitely when I learned how animals were raised for food and then how they were slaughtered, I just thought, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. And so that has been consistent. The evolution over the 15 years has been very interesting. I certainly have learned about both the health benefits and also the environmental benefits to being vegan. So if anything, my decision to not harm animals to the extent possible in my life has been reinforced and supported by learning about the degradation of the earth by growing crops to then feed animals. And in many cases, crops that they would not ordinarily eat, but it makes them grow faster. So, and then the health reasons, if nothing else, 70% of antibiotics are used for animals. So 70% of all antibiotics that are produced in the world are used to try to keep animals healthy. And it's now causing this antibiotic resistance, which I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning, and somebody was quoted, a medical person was quoted saying, it could be the end of modern medicine if we are no longer resistant to, I mean, if we continue to be resistant to antibiotics. So it's just everywhere you turn, the reasons to have a vegan diet are just, I would say, pretty profound.
Okay. Through our friendship, Suzanne, I've learned about the extent of animal use and abuse in industries beyond food, such as pharmaceuticals and cosmetics testing, fashion, entertainment, tourism. In your daily life, what are some of the vegan choices that you make that might not be obvious to a non-vegan around things like that beyond food?
That's a really good question. It's so interesting because I was chatting with a group of my, in my vegan group yesterday. We have started a book and film club. So we had watched a film called Penguin Bloom, which was wonderful. And it was about a magpie in Australia who comes into the family of a woman who's had a horrible accident. She was a great athlete and broke her back and was paralyzed. Anyway, long story short, in discussing that film, we started talking about the films that some of us will just not watch because either they're just too traumatizing,
right?
Or we know that, like, there was I think it was a World War I movie recently, like within the last couple of years, and one of the stars of the movie was a horse, and I think that the movie might have been named after the horse.
Yes.
I thought, I can't watch this. So it's an emotional thing for me where I don't want to further traumatize myself by watching something that I know is going to be incredibly painful. Right. Now, that is not to say that I don't sometimes watch documentaries to educate myself, but I'm really, really careful about what I watch.
Okay.
So does that answer?
Well, any other aspects like pharmaceuticals or over-the-counter things that have been, or cosmetics or things that have been tested on animals, do you avoid those?
To the extent that I can, I do. I wouldn't say that I'm religious about it, but I'm pretty careful in that there's an organization called the American Anti-Vivisection Society. It actually started, I think, in the 1850s or 60s in Jenkintown, where I live.
Oh.
Yeah. And so they have been against vivisection of animals, but they also produce a little pamphlet that's called Leaping Bunny. And you can look at any cosmetics or shampoos or lotions, and it will say on the back whether it's been tested on animals. Now, what
Okay.
I've also learned is that a particular company, say, let's just say Lancome, I don't know if this is accurate, they may have a brand within Lancome that is not tested on animals, but the parent company will test on animals. So it's real. That's why I say I'm not necessarily religious. I try to do my due diligence
Okay.
and not use any products, shampoos, cosmetics, anything like that that has been tested on animals. Same with medications. If I have to take a medication, I'm trying to remember what is the one that they used to get from the urine of horses. I can't remember now what it was, but so yeah, I try to do the best I can. I'm conscious. Let's put it that way. I'm conscious.
Yes, I've seen that. All right. How have your conversations and your vocabulary about vegan life evolved over the years? And I mean, your conversations with non-vegans. Did it start out a certain way? Has it evolved into something else?
Hmm.
And then I have a follow-on question to that, Suzanne. How has the world evolved to make it easier or more impactful to talk about veganism?
Well, let me see if I can answer the first question. And I'll start by saying I was not prepared for the pushback I got when I told people I had adopted a vegan lifestyle. I was really shocked. And I've talked to you about that, but
Yes.
there was so much like outright hostility. And I was just astounded, like, why is what I'm eating so offensive to you?
Right.
And so I have done a lot of study and thinking about that and realized that it is in some ways threatened to people, and people assume I'm judging them. And so I've understood that. So if anything, I guess I've really grappled a lot with this to create a balance of being authentic, but also recognizing that in many cases, I'm going to get a negative reaction. And the last thing I want to do is alienate people about veganism. And but I have also come to understand that we are going to be viewed as extremists and kooky and whatever, as a way to deflect attention from, well, why are you vegan? You know, somebody like you really wanting to know why I made that decision. So it's a constant evolution. I would say that in the last year or so, I've really tried to be, I think I pulled back a lot in the beginning, because who wants to have hostility constantly coming at them? At least that's not something I find pleasant.
Right.
And so I became kind of quiet about it. And then I realized that isn't good either, because then I'm not being authentic about something that is so important to me. So, like I said, I'm trying to strike a balance and be a little bit more assertive about it and take my lumps if somebody is hostile to me or challenges me in a, you know, in a kind of a nasty way. And then the second was world. Has the world evolved? Is that
How
what
has the world evolved to make it easier or more impactful to talk about veganism? Like, is it such a unique thing these days that you still get the same reaction, or are people more open or less scared of a concept like veganism? Like,
I would say that it's definitely more it's more in the public eye. It's not, I mean, Saturday Night Live had a skit. I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, but it was making fun of vegans. Well, you don't make fun of something that isn't on people's radar screens, or they wouldn't bother. So whenever something like that happens, during the presidential primaries, I remember somebody asking Cory Booker about his veganism. And the moderator said, "Are you going to ask everybody to become vegan?" And he quickly said no. First of all, it was a stupid question.
That is a stupid question.
Really stupid question. And I think he was clearly caught off guard. We vegans were really bummed that he didn't say, "Well, if I could, I would, but I know that's unrealistic." But he didn't say that. So the fact that he was asked that question, presidential campaign, it's known he's vegan. So it's more in the public eye. It's certainly much, much more visible in grocery stores. There's a lawsuit by the dairy industry that wants to ban oat milk, soy milk. They don't want them to be able to call it milk.
Yes.
So it is more on the radar screen, but nowhere near as much as I wish it was.
Okay.
I will say that.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the previous question. You talked about how your conversations have changed. What about vocabulary? Have you found new words to describe what you believe or what you practice? Not that you should have to, but for instance, something as simple as plant-based versus vegan, or any terminology around animal cruelty or animal testing that seems to resonate with non-vegans more than the terms I just mentioned.
Well, the first one, vegan versus plant-based, I've had discussions again with some of my fellow vegans about that, and we realize that some of us use plant-based at times because it appears less offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there we are in some ways being self-protective.
Right.
So some of us have decided we're not going to use that anymore because we're not going to hide behind it. And the second part of that is plant-based really is more talking about our diets.
Yes.
As opposed to, do you buy down coats? Like, I don't buy anything made with down.
Right.
I don't buy anything made with leather. So we've already talked about cosmetics and things like that. So to the extent possible, I am not using I don't buy anything that has used animals in the process of making it. Okay. So it's tricky. It's tricky, and it's very much on both my mind and the minds of people who I talk to who are vegan, who are also, I'm sure there are a lot of vegans out there who are not activists. I would say vegan and also something of an activist. So I'm out there, and so I am talking to people.
Well, that leads me to one of my other questions. How did your activism evolve? Was there something that compelled you initially to become an activist and to help raise awareness?
Well, this is a funny question. Funny for me, because I've been an activist since the 1960s, during the Vietnam War. So I came of age. I turned 18 in 1968, and the Vietnam War was raging, and was going to school in Manhattan, and happened to be going to school really at the epicenter. I went to Barnard, next door to Columbia. Mm-hmm. And it was the epicenter on the East Coast for the anti-war demonstrations. And I joined them. And in many ways, I've never stopped being an activist. Probably mostly getting involved in political campaigns over the years. And so I think it's just part of my nature.
Mhm.
that if I feel deeply about something, well, then do something about it. So whether it's making phone calls during a political campaign, sending out postcards, knocking door to door, flying down to Florida during the, I forget which election it was, and then with veganism, it just I think hearing about particular situations, as you know, I'm very involved with this orca who has been at the Miami Seaquarium for 50 years. And I have done many, many things over the years to try to get her out of that concrete tank. So sometimes it's on an individual basis like that, and sometimes it's broader, like going to fairs where I'll have a table set up.
Okay, that you answered two questions for me there.
You're a
What
great interviewer, by the way.
preparation? What three things, let's say, do you wish non-vegans understood about vegans in general? And then what do you wish your non-vegan family and friends understood about you specifically? It doesn't have to be three, it could be one, two, three.
Yeah. What I wish that people understood about us is that it's not some really foreign
Conspiracy.
Well, it's not like so odd or I'm at a loss for words of how to say what I want to say. It seems absolutely natural once you realize, like me, that the way that animals are raised for food, and I don't care whether it's on some pasture and it's grass fed, they're still going to be hauled off to the slaughterhouse. And that's not where they want to go. And it's not what they were designed to do. So it seems absolutely natural. And that eating animals is absolutely unnecessary for our well-being. So I guess what I would hope is that they would say, this is really natural and easy to do, and not think of it as this monumental, I have to denounce, God, religion, and, whatever. It's not extreme. It's just not extreme. At least I don't see it that way. And then with regard to my family, I would say most of my friends are incredibly supportive. My family, it's been a little bit rougher. And I think that's generally what happens is when one person in a family changes, and I know this from family therapy, it forces everybody in the family, it impacts the family. So there's no way to make a change and not impact the family. So by my showing up at family events and people realizing either I'm going to bring my own food or they have to think about what do we have for Suzanne to eat. I think it's been in some cases an annoyance and very, very hurtful. As recently as last week, I had a conversation with one of my brothers-in-law, and I teared up in telling him that his kind of poking fun at me over these 15 years for my veganism, number one, wasn't funny. Wasn't funny the first time, it's not funny 15 years later. And that, but even more important was that I felt that something that is so important to me was not being appreciated or honored at all, or even seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been really, really hurtful. So, and it could be about anything. If I adopted, Buddhism, or if I became very involved in a nonprofit that was giving food to the homeless or something like that, if people made fun of me for doing that, I would feel the same way. Like, this is
Mhm.
something that means so much to me. Can we not make fun of it at the very least?
Right, exactly.
And at the most, can we say, like you have to me, that
Tell
you,
me more about it.
well, that you admire me. You say, you put your principles into action. You don't just say it, but you do it. Well,
Absolutely.
that is feels, just, it's heartwarming. So,
Okay. Speaking of principles, um, years ago, excuse me, I asked a vegetarian the reason he's a vegetarian, and his reply was yes to all, meaning it all the reasons, whatever reason there is, that's why.
okay.
And so, what do you find is the most common reason or reasons that others are vegan, or is it generally yes to all? Is it a food thing, a sustainability thing, a cruelty thing, or maybe as people come into veganism, what is it that compels them, and then do they sort of evolve into a larger group of principles? Does that
I
make
think
sense?
what you just said, it's the latter, that most people enter it from, it
Health.
may be that somebody is really, like in the movie Cowspiracy, the two guys that made that movie started that movie by being concerned about climate change. And it was through doing research and putting it on film, and you can see it in the movie where they're awestruck. Well, why isn't anybody talking about the impact of animal agriculture on climate change and the degradation of the earth? So they came into it from there. I came into it, as I described, because of the cruelty to animals. A lot of people come in through for health reasons, where they want to lose weight, or their cholesterol is high, or they have high blood pressure, or whatever. And they start learning, and there are enough doctors now who are beginning to, heart disease can be reversed with a vegan diet, and it's been studied and proven.
Mhm.
What we have found, and by we I mean me and a lot of the people who I talk to about this, if you come in for health reasons, you're much less likely to stick to it. And so it's the proverbial, you
Really?
start a diet and you don't stick with it.
Okay.
People who come in for environmental reasons, or because of the atrocities of the animal agriculture, they're more likely to stay. And I would say, of the three reasons, those who come in because of the abuse of animals, they are the ones that don't change. It's just like a non-starter.
Okay.
I'm doing this and I will never change.
So does the messaging in your activism and your outreach, does it change to appeal to that type of person who is very most concerned about the animal cruelty, or the versus the health and diet aspects of it?
It really depends. On Saturday, I supported a friend who had a table at an Earth Day event. Now, this Earth Day event had nothing to do with veganism, and she knew that. She, applied to have a table set up. And what she did, which I thought was ingenious, but talk about coming in like under the radar. So she had Trader Joe's meatballs, meatless meatballs, and marinara sauce in a crock pot. And when people were walking by, she would say, "Would you like to try a meatball?" Well, there were no other food vendors at this event. So people were flocking. And they came and they ate, and they said, "Oh my gosh, this is delicious. What is it?" And she would show them. She also had literature on the table about the impact of animal agriculture on the environment.
Mhm.
So, in that instance, these people are interested in the environment. It's Earth Day. She didn't advertise this as, "I'm a vegan and I want to preach to you about veganism." But it was so, I'll tell you one story that it was so interesting. This woman came by. She said, "I'm so hungry. I'll eat anything." And so Cheryl gave her the little cup with the meatball with the sauce on it, and she took the bite. She said, "Oh my gosh, this is delicious." And then she said, "I was a little afraid to eat it." She was afraid to eat something that was plant-based.
Unbelievable.
So it's just, yes. So talk about like a soft landing. That's what Cheryl did. And I said to Cheryl later, I said, "Cheryl, this was ingenious what you did. You weren't promoting anything in particular. There was nothing on her table other than, she had some very compelling literature, but you had to come up to the table to
Yes.
look for it. And her way of getting people was to give them a meatless meatball.
Right. Try it. You'll like it.
Yeah.
Right?
Now-
Part of the illusion there.
Yeah. And, at a veg fest, obviously, then you're going to approach it from a vegan standpoint. And I've tabled where it's vegan spirituality, and that's a little bit of a slightly different bent, because for those of us who belong to vegan spirituality, we think of veganism as our spiritual path. It's not a religion, but it's a driving force. It's my values, it's how I want to live my life. The way a Christian would say, well, I'm trying to follow in Jesus's footsteps, or if you're Muslim, in Allah's footsteps, or so.
Funny, we're having all these sequiturs because my next question was, what is veganism to you? Is it a way of life, a heightened consciousness, a belief system, a mission? And would you say that you practice it or you simply live it?
I think I do both, but I definitely, I would say that it is in some ways a spiritual practice, but unlike meditation, where I have to remind myself to meditate, and I don't do it every day. I've gone through periods where I did it every day, but right now I'm not doing it every day. My veganism, I'm doing every single day because I'm choosing to eat that way, or to shop that way, for non-food items. And it informs every decision I make, pretty much.
Absolutely. I've seen that and heard it.
So I mean, I don't know whether that answered. That was a really good question, but you have to repeat it.
What is veganism to you? Is it a way of life, a heightened consciousness, a belief system, a mission? And would you say you practice it or simply live it? And you live it.
It is a heightened consciousness. So I liked that terminology. It really was like when I made that transition after I read that book, and I thought, how could I not have thought about this before? How could I not have asked myself, where did this cow come from? Where did this pig come from? What was its life, his or her life like? Where does milk come from? I mean, like the thought that we are taking the babies from these mothers for us to drink milk that we can't metabolize is insanity. And that we're the only species that continues to drink milk after weaning. I never ever thought about it. Then once you know it, you think, how could I not have known that, or not even thought about it? So if nothing else, it's taught me how brainwashing works, how denial works. It is and continues to be shocking to me. And my guess is that there are many other things in my life that I'm just as blind to, and I don't know what they are because I'm blind.
Interesting. Well, no, I doubt that, but I do.
I was blind to that, Nancy. I was blind to it.
And I think a lot of it has to do with tradition and how people are brought up. For instance, as you know, I lived in Italy for a while, and they can't fathom anyone drinking a glass of milk for lunch. They think it is so bad on the digestion. That's their approach to it. And in fact, they look down their nose if you order any kind of a coffee drink with milk in it after 11 o'clock in the morning or after lunch.
Yeah.
But that's how they have been
Yeah.
raised. And so people are raised with meat, and you have to dislodge that tradition just like you would something else in a culture. If they're open to it.
Which, I mean, a great example of that, I remember telling you about this, my great nephew, and I think this is true of many, many people, was lactose intolerant as an infant. Not his mother's lactose, but
Mm-hmm.
the lactose from milk. And so they had to keep him from milk and dairy products for the first almost 2 years of his life. And I'll never forget it when they were little by little introducing it to him so that he could eat it, rather than saying, maybe his system is telling us something. And that we were at the dining room table for Christmas dinner. There were about 10 of us around the table, and Reese was putting butter on his bread. And all of the adults in the room, except me, clapped and cheered. And I almost burst into tears because I thought,
Yeah,
this is how it starts. He's getting applauded for eating something that he couldn't tolerate 6 months ago.
right.
So,
Or that he
yes,
could live
talk
without.
about enculturation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I have more questions, but none of them prepared. So if we have time, I can keep going.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at how long we've been speaking. I'm not quite sure. Can't quite tell. I would
Yeah,
say that we can wrap it up maybe in a few minutes.
Okay.
So
I
love, by the way, I love the bird sound. Love it.
I was wondering how loud that is.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
As I'm into words and language and stuff like
Yes,
this.
you are.
I was looking up the definition of vegan, and some ads and things popped up about vegan athletes, and I know you get that protein question all the time. This is not about that, but can you talk about myths that famous people have broken down or proven wrong about veganism, and not just famous people, but the athletes and this whole
Right. I mean, I think the one about real men don't eat quiche. Well, real men don't eat anything but meat, red meat, whatever, is ridiculous. And I'm trying to remember the name of the movie that actually follows a bunch of athletes, and Arnold Schwarzenegger being one of them, who recently became vegan. And I think it was the Tennessee Titans. One of their wives was vegan. And so she would cook for the whole team, and they would come over, and it was hysterical looking at these huge, huge football players eating vegan food and loving it. And one scene is the doctor showing these guys, three of them. I think one was a Miami Dolphin, one was a Tennessee Titan, and I can't remember who the other one was, showing them a vial of their blood after eating one hamburger versus what it was like when they had been eating a vegan diet. And it was mind-blowing. One hamburger. So I think more and more people are getting educated that, number one, you do not need red meat, chicken, protein from animals in order to be incredibly strong and healthy. In fact, you're healthier without it. But definitely not you don't need it if you want to run a marathon. I think it's the strongest man in the world. I don't know what his name is, but he's Eastern European and he can lift a car. He's vegan. This guy who does ultra marathons, 100-mile races, I think he ran the Appalachian Trail, this guy, vegan, you know, so it's, the myths are dispelled, for sure. And for those people who are willing to look at it, a lot of people don't want to look at it. Yeah. So,
But fortunately, celebrities are using their celebrity to promote this.
hey, Joaquin Phoenix, when he accepted his Oscar last year, I think it was in 2020, and he talked about the anguish of witnessing a mother cow be separated from her calf. And, you know, that was heard by millions and millions of people. And so you're right. Who has a megaphone? I don't really have a megaphone. I have a little tiny megaphone, which is part of what I'm doing with you.
And you make great use of that little megaphone, Suzanne. You make great use of it.
Well, anyway, thankfully there are people like me, and there are people like Joaquin, and many, many people who are trying to get the word out that I didn't say this, so it's the word out. You know, you asked earlier, like, what it means to me. I feel at peace with it. Like, I don't have any, I feel at peace. Whereas I don't know that I didn't feel at peace before I woke up, so to speak.
Mhm.
But I suspect that there was a part of me that was not quite tuned in. It was blocked, and that's not blocked anymore.
Good.
So,
I'm glad you
yeah.
deserve peace.
Yes, yes.
Nice.
Well, I thought your questions were fabulous. And I have to tell you that my mind has been going as you've been talking, and I've been thinking, so Nancy and I need to collaborate. So I don't know where that's going to go, but
Okay.
that's on my mind, because I thought your questions were fabulous. So thank you.
You're
Really.
welcome. Thank you, Suzanne.
All right.